guys, welcome to my YouTube channel where I'll be talking all things software development, from technical skills as well as career and soft skills in the space of software development. So what I'm going to be talking a little bit about is one of the things that's quite tied to my kind of personal development and career path is the transition from a permanent employee into contracting. So I've been a software developer for about 10 years, primarily sort of started in the finance space. Now I've gone into contracting for maybe the last 2 or 3 years. So what is kind of the main differences between being a permanent employee and a contractor? Well, one of those main differences is the whole idea of flexibility. So with a contractor, you're kind of expected that after 6 months or a year's time, your contract will probably come to an end, where you might have to look for another line of work and you might have to look for future contract positions to kind of get the bills paid going forth. So that does mean that you typically are involved with working a number of different projects. Within a 2-year span or a 3-year span, you could be working on quite a series and a range of different teams and projects within the software development space. So it does mean that you have to have the ability to kind of pick up new technologies or new problems quite quickly and be able to prove your worth in a short period of time. Obviously versus a permanent position, a little bit more safeguarded, and you have a bit more assurances that you'll probably be needed for a longer period of time. But obviously anything can happen. At the time of making this video, we've been going through the whole COVID situation. So even a permanent position is not necessarily a safe bet, but it is a safer bet than sometimes contracting is. Main benefit for contracting, typically it's compensation. And when you kind of think about maybe the average salary for a software developer here in London in the UK, typically around 55k, 60k, and that's an annual, obviously 60k annually. Now versus the average contracting daily pay rate, that's typically £500 per day. You range in an annual compensation comparable to a salary of about 117,000 a year. So between those two numbers, the 60k and the 117,000 a year, those are quite big differences. The main difference obviously is, as a contractor, with that flexibility does come more things that you have to look into. So when it comes to sick days and holidays, is going to be days that you're not going to be paid. So you will have to account that in your, your total compensation and leave some of that money for some of those rainy days where you might be off work as well due to either an illness, sickness. And so it all depends on how much you've kind of budgeted away to save and what your inclination is for that risk of whether you prefer going that contracting route versus the permanent route. So I guess the main question, hopefully you'll come away with this, is it worth it? And is it worth kind of getting into the contract space here in the UK? Obviously, I think in my situation, as I mentioned, I've been a contractor for about 3 years. So I have found it worth it and beneficial, particularly in terms of that flexibility and kind of having new situations and new positions where you are expected to kind of perform different lines of work, which can be quite interesting for some. Some do prefer to have something that is a little bit more stable and having that stable line of work. So there's typically 2 ways to be a contractor here in the UK. One, which is a more common situation, is having your own private limited company, where the client that you'll have, the company that you work for, or the individual that's sort of contracted you to perform that work, will pay your business account, and that money will go directly to your business. It's then up to you and your accountant, which you will need, actually do some of the the accounting and the books for the year end and the taxes that you might need to pay, such as corporation tax and VAT. But out of that, you then pay yourself out of that money via the business account. So that is typically in the form of a salary, which you will try and keep fairly low so that you don't have too much tax implications coming from the salary itself. And then you also have the rest that you can take out as dividends. which basically effectively is because you're the shareholder of the company, most likely the solo shareholder, you'll pay yourself dividends out of the stock you own out of the company. So that's another way you can kind of withdraw that money from there. So it's important to note that you don't have to use a limited company if you want to engage in work to become a contractor. You can always receive payment through an alternative method using umbrella company. There's thousands of umbrella companies out there that all that's required is for you to work with them and you will receive payment via the umbrella company the same way you would if you were a permanent employee. That way you're not really on the hook for working out any of the tax yourself. You don't need any accountant or to pay any accounting fees, and typically you can still charge a fair daily rate compared to even being a permanent employee. So sometimes that might be, depending on what's out there in terms of contracts, and you want it 100% sure, make sure that you're IR35 compliant. That is an alternative way to become a contractor and to engage in work that way. So it's important to know when you're using your limited company to engage in work, you should be aware of the IR35 legislation. The legislation does make sure that you are following the rules when it comes to engaging in client-based work and using your company to receive payment. There are IR35 specialists out there that can actually check your contract once you do have an offer from the particular client that you're intending to work with, just to make sure that it is IR35 compliant and are permitted to use your limited company to receive payment when you're doing that client's work. I will put a link in the description below so that you can actually click that and find out a little bit more information on IR35. But that's always something to make note of when you're engaging in a contract. Well, I say that completely depends on what it is you value. Is it the stable income that you probably most likely will get when you're a permanent employee? Or is it kind of the ability to have that flexible approach of work with contracting and the potential for increased compensation as well? So that completely depends on what it is you value out of the two. Well, I hope you found this video informative. I put some links in the description below, so if you want to find out anything more about the things that I've said, particularly in regard to setting up a company and getting into contracting, there'll be some more information below. And if you found this informative, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. You can be on the watch out for future videos a little bit like this.